All right, guys, our next session is kicking off. It is for anybody who's interested in GLP-1s or taking GLP-1s, like myself, preserving muscle mass during GLP-1 therapy, nutrition, and integrative approaches with Dr. Jaclyn Leong. Please welcome Dr. Jaclyn. She's coming, I promise. Okay. Thank you so much. No problem. I had a feeling people... She'll be making ice cream for everybody in her hotel room. All right, guys. Please give a round of applause one more time, and we're going to kick off. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being here. I'm very excited.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Leong. I'm so excited to be here with you all. And GLP-1s are, very popular, and I'm sure everyone has heard about them on the news, especially with muscle mass. So just wanted to give a few disclosures. Just want to let you know I have no relevant financial relationships. I have no affiliations or conflict of interest. And the content of this presentation is educational purposes only, not intended for individual medical advice. So GLP-1s, as you know them, like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Saxenda. So how many of you are on these? Just around, all right. So we got like at least probably half. How many of you are considering them? Thinking about them, okay. And how many of you know someone that's on it? So I think they're very popular, right? So so the content of today that I'm gonna go over is the GLP-1s and its impact on body composition, whether it's adaptive or maladaptive, more specifically for muscle loss. And what are some practical things that you can take today about integrative and lifestyle to mitigate these losses? So most specifically, nutrition, exercise, and actually nutraceuticals. I'm not sure if in my introduction, but I'm also an integrative practitioner, so a lot of holistic and using integrative therapies to assist with muscle. So what do we know about the muscle loss right now? So actually this isn't new news. I know it's all over the news about muscle loss, but muscle loss is actually not unique. We actually see it with, significant diets. We see it with bariatric surgery, and they're actually pretty comparative. But in fact, with these GLP-1s, we actually see that some of the muscle quality actually might be better while being on it. So that's something that is, currently being studied. And typically the muscle that is lost is actually proportional to the weight loss. So what we're seeing right now is about 25 to 40% of the weight loss can actually be from lean body mass. But again, like I mentioned, we can often see this with bariatric surgery. The muscle loss is typically proportional to total weight loss, which is a common feature of weight reduction. And just a reminder, I'm sure a lot of you guys have also heard, but 2/3 of the loss that's typically weight that is lost on the GLP-1s can be regained within the first year is what we're seeing, along with cardiometabolic improvements, unfortunately. But some good news, right, is that actually, if we look back at some of these randomized clinical trials, we're looking at is that if you combine, for example, exercise or lifestyle, there's actually a less amount of lean body mass change. And actually, if you look at the bottom, at my slide. So bottom of my slide over there, you can see that one of the studies with liraglutide, which is also known as Saxenda, with exercise, more specifically resistance training, you can see that the percent lean change actually went up versus then, went down. So there are things that we can do to mitigate these. So again, the current evidence of muscle loss is generally proportional, and actually GLP-1s can improve muscle quality by reducing fat infiltration to the muscle and enhancing insulin sensitivity, which may actually offset some of these negative effects of the muscle mass loss. So a little bit more on the muscle, right? So current evidence, we're looking at, is the muscle metabolism actually, good, or is it bad? So overall, I would say that a lot of the studies, they talk about the mitochondria, so that's like the energy within the cell, and that the muscle is actually doing good at maintaining them. So what we see is that there's an increase in fatty acid oxidation, so that's like burning more fat. There's more thermogenesis, so you're burning more energy and you have a lot more heat, and this may aid in the weight loss. But with this, some people, if you're on it, you may notice that you may actually have a little bit more muscle fatigue, or you're feeling a little bit more tired than somebody else. So that is what we're seeing, is that there are some side effects, right, of this. So pretty common, but what can we do about it? So I'm sure you've seen some of these people, a lot of celebrities, right? How many of you have heard of the term skinny fat? Yeah. How many of you have heard of the term Ozempic face? Yeah. So how do we avoid this, right? So this is the thing that we want to do, and the main thing that I think we can do is obviously, we know that with rapid weight loss, this is what can be an issue, right? So a lot of people want to lose a lot of weight very fast, and these medications can do that. But, a gradual weight loss and trying to maintain muscle mass. And I think, how many of you know Sharon Osbourne? Have kind of read her story? She, basically, had developed the Ozempic face, or, became very, aged, basically, from taking Ozempic. And so we want to avoid that. So how do we avoid muscle loss? Well, so I'm going to go down to just the basic science. But muscle protein synthesis is really what we look at when we're looking at these papers. We're looking at how do we build muscle. And so muscle protein synthesis is the process of building muscle. Typically, we focus mostly on muscle synthesis, less than muscle breakdown. But they both play a huge part in a balancing act, trying to figure out, how do we gain more muscle? So it's kind of this balancing act of the both. So what is MPS? So MPS, or muscle protein synthesis, is the process of which new muscle proteins are formed in the body. This is critical for muscle growth. It's very complex. It has a lot of different inputs, such as neural activity, external loading, like resistance training, growth factors, hormones, what you're eating, inflammatory mediators, whether or not you're oxygenating, and stress, metabolic stress, oxidative stress. But the thing I want you to kind of remember from this is actually the signal of mTOR. How many of you have heard of mTOR or have an idea of what this might be? Kind of, yeah. So the science of it, this is like the background, is like this signal of what we call mTOR. It's actually central to the regulation of our metabolism and our growth to growing cells. So it's, and just to let you know, with mTOR, this is, skeletal muscle is highly adaptive and it can modify all throughout life. So just because you lose it doesn't mean you can't regain it, right? So it's good to remember that. So mTOR is the molecular switch. It turns on muscle building mode, typically after resistance training. Just a little science behind it. mTOR phosphorylates these really fancy molecules, P70S, 6K, and 4-EBP1, which enhance, basically protein growth. And activity of this mTOR is actually reduced by what we call AMPK activation. I don't know if some of you kind of know about that, but if you're in longevity, AMPK is inflammatory. So this can be reduced by nutrient deficiency, inflammation, and thus it limits its growth. So this is just the background. So when we're looking at these things that I'm going to give you today, it kind of gives you an idea of what we want to do to activate this. So practical approaches. I know that was a lot of science to start with, but I'm going to give you some things that, simple questions, and I think this kind of piggybacks off of Dr. Davis's talk. I know he talked all about protein. So we're going to go over the nutrition. So these are lifestyle approaches that you can implement, and exercise. So these 4 questions. So what should you be eating? How much dietary protein intake? I know he touched on that. Where should you be getting your protein, and when should you be eating your protein? So what should you be eating? So lots of different dietary patterns. As you know, there's so many diets and fads. I'm sure you've all tried several different kinds. But most particularly with muscle mass, there's a really good study that shows that traditional dietary patterns actually predicted greater muscle mass, and actually an anti-inflammatory diet predicted even greater muscle mass with better muscle function over 15 years. So what is a traditional dietary pattern? This is like eating before everything got industrialized and the adoption of processed foods. So we know processed foods are enemy. So going back to the old traditional patterns. And then anti-inflammatory diet. This is a diet that's used to reduce chronic inflammation, typically focuses on nutrient-dense foods that modulates inflammatory pathways. So just a little bit more on them. So traditional, what you'll focus on is whole, unprocessed, local, and seasonal foods, moderate amounts of animal products, meals that are typically prepared from scratch. So this is like the Mediterranean diet, which I'm sure you guys, very popularly have heard about, especially if you have cardiovascular issues, but even an Asian traditional diet, Latin American traditional diets. So that's an example of that. And then anti-inflammatory, typically these focus on phytonutrient-rich foods, omega-3s, antioxidants like polyphenols, flavonoids, carotenoids, whole grains, plant-based proteins, reduced refined carbs, fats, and trans fats, and then no processed meats and no pro-inflammatory oils. I'm sure you guys have seen the fad about that, like different oils, like avoiding corn, soybean, and then obviously getting enough fiber. So there's certain foods in the anti-inflammatory diet that you would be emphasizing on, like olive oil, turmeric, ginger, for example. So obviously you had a big talk on protein. So several studies obviously say that protein intake is a big boost for muscle, and that's all over, very evidence-based that protein is the key. So how much dietary intake of protein should you be getting while being on these medications? Well, typically for muscle building, I say that you have a bit higher range while being on a GLP-1. Lots of different studies focus on, different numbers, but I would say if it's all based on how much you currently weigh, okay? So you can calculate how much protein you should be getting based on your body weight, because everyone's different, everyone's unique. So, but being on these medications, you want to multiply your body weight by, in kilograms, by 1.6 to 2.2. 2.2 is the higher end. They've shown that, if you eat more than 2.2, there's really not much of a huge gain past that. But at minimum, I would say that you should be eating at least 1.6 times your body weight. And where should we be getting this protein? As you just heard by Dr. Davis, plant protein can actually still boost your muscle mass. But a lot of, this is a recent trials have shown this. In the past, a lot of people say, the evidence shows that animal protein actually can boost more muscle mass. And so animal protein is, animal meat, casein, whey, which is typically found in milk proteins. But this is because they're slightly better for muscle protein synthesis because they're a bit more digestible and they have less of the plant structures that need to be broken down. And also, in particular, leucine. So if you remember me talking about mTOR, and mTOR being the signal, leucine actually particularly increases mTOR. So it stimulates mTOR to build more muscle. And then just a little bit more, and I think Dr. Davis also talked about this, but actually, there are direct comparisons to animal protein and plant-based proteins are very, same muscle protein synthesis stimulating. However, the plant proteins, they should be blended, like different types of plant proteins, or they should be fortified. So mixing pea, soy, lysine, enriched blends. So what about all these supplements? Where else can we get the protein? Well, I'm sure you've seen, Premier Protein, who's our big sponsor. Should we be eating supplements or whole foods? I think I get asked this all the time in my clinic. Well, okay, if I need protein and I don't want to eat, chicken, can I just have protein shakes all day? Yeah, technically, yes, the supplements, they can increase your muscle mass because they're actually very equivalent. In the studies, they show that supplements in whole food, actually, they're very, as long as it's a similar amino acid makeup, they can actually stimulate muscle mass. However, whole foods, they provide high quality protein and they have essential micronutrients, healthy fats, other bioactive compounds that are not typically seen in your protein shake, right? So they can actually help with the recovery and your health and your performance. So yes, you can, but whole foods is better. So I usually recommend doing whole foods if you can first. All right, so protein timing and distribution. So how many of you are fasting? Okay, good. I'm shocked. Okay, only a handful of you guys are fasting. That's really good. Fasting, how many of you eat one meal a day? Okay, so we still have a handful. So the best distribution, so those of you who are fasting and taking GLP-1s, it's really not helpful to build muscle and maintain muscle mass. So having an even distribution, so spreading your protein intake evenly actually results in a higher 24-hour MPS rather than doing a skewed intake like having one meal a day. So if you require 90 grams of protein, you should try to break it up into even distributions throughout the day. When else should you be having your protein? Well, after exercise. So really important that you get your protein immediately after you exercise, especially after resistance training. That can actually stimulate a higher MPS than at any other time, really. So you should try to get it within the first 30 minutes to an hour. Also, there's been great studies on how else when we should be eating protein and what kind, actually before sleep. How many of you have grew up drinking warm milk at nighttime? It's an old, I think, Yeah, you did? Yeah, warm milk? Oh, powdered milk, okay. Oh, okay, yeah. So same thing, yeah. Yeah, so powdered milk, yeah. So just warm milk, the saying is, before sleep, actually, we're finding that if you have a casein, which is a slow digesting protein before sleep, this actually can reduce your muscle mass overnight and actually enhance more muscle building, so increase MPS at nighttime. Especially, people who are older, and they also did it on younger athletes as well. So really, I recommend this. So if you do yogurt, obviously, or cottage cheese, for high protein. Those are great pre-sleep proteins. So also, in terms of distribution, at each meal, like I mentioned, should be evenly distributed. So how much protein at each time? Well, the studies show that actually you should at least have 20 grams. So if you're having protein at that one time and it's under 20 grams, it's not the most optimal to stimulate MPS. And actually, if you're older, that may be higher, so the requirements may be closer to 40 grams. So between 20 and 40 grams should be your goal between each time that you do eat. All right, so there's... Yes, per meal. Yes, per meal. Per meal. Yep. Oh, muscle protein synthesis. Yes, sorry. I'm using MPS, so I don't have to say the 3 words. Yeah, so MPS. So the whole thing is like, how can we increase our muscle protein synthesis? So building muscle. Yep. So exercise. So, all this protein, there's, we can eat all this protein, which helps, at least maintain muscle mass, but we want to build muscle mass, right? In order to have that, you got to exercise. And so what kind of exercise should you be doing, and how to exercise, and exercise timing, and how frequently should you be doing this? I think, a lot of people, they're working with personal trainers, so they do get some of this advice, but just to break it down for you guys and what the evidence is on this. So what kind of exercise should you be doing? Mostly for muscle building. I think a lot of us know that resistance training is the key factor here. So, aerobic exercise, moderate to vigorous alone increases GLP-1 actually and supports weight loss, but it's actually less effective than resistance training for muscle mass preservation. So resistance training is the most effective exercise at preserving muscle mass and especially during weight loss or on GLP-1 therapy. What about combination? So resistance training versus combined aerobic and resistance. So actually there was a study done on Taekwondo, and so programs that combine aerobic and resistance elements, they actually improve muscle mass and GLP-1 levels, so it can be helpful for that. And actually in older adults, this Taekwondo study, they showed that there was an increase in muscle mass. So in my opinion, I think that, if you're trying to build more muscle mass, then resistance training is the key, but if you can do combination of aerobic and resistance, then that is better. So just an idea of what this might look like. So aerobics, you would do 20 to 40 minutes per session. Either you can do that in continuous or you can do interval training. And then for resistance, you want to aim for moderate intensity, 2 to 4 sets, and then the repetitions we'll talk about, but about 20 to 40 minutes. So how do we optimize resistance training? And I feel like I talk about this so much with my patients in my clinic because they're like, oh, Dr. Leong, I'm not seeing any change in my muscle mass, and I'm like, well, and I have a personal trainer, and I said, well, what are you guys doing? You have a personal trainer. And I'm like, oh, well, maybe I meet with them like once a week. That's not good enough. So, and we'll talk more. So how do we optimize resistance training? Well, I think a lot of us have heard, how many reps you should be doing. The American College of Sports Medicine actually gives this amount of repetitions that is recommended. They usually say 8 to 12, but actually this is not the case, and there's really a lack of evidence. So what we should be aiming for is repetitions can be any number, but as long as you're taking your muscles to failure. So it can be any number. It can range from 8 to 25 to 40. Really doesn't matter. So there's no magic number there. Yeah, so taken to failure is like, basically you have no energy left to do another repetition. Yep, take your muscles. Yep, tired, like you can't do another one. Basically, you can't do another one. That's taken to failure. So your muscle is just so tired. And so how many sets should you be doing, okay? So actually doing one set is not enough. So, doing multiple sets actually increases MPS. So higher training volume, so more sets, results in greater muscle mass. And so what's the number? There's actually a magic number for sets. So you should aim for 3 to 5 sets per session of exercise for most optimal muscle growth. And so they did show that, if you do 4 to 6, there might be a little bit more benefit. Doing more than 5 to 6 actually doesn't yield more than that and actually can put you at risk of overtraining. So training to failure. So I know we just talked about that. So training to failure is like not being able to do any more. But what the studies have shown that is, if you go too much training to failure, like meeting training to failure at every set, you may actually reduce your training volume, meaning like you're just so tired for the next set that you can't actually put enough effort or volume in your next set. So what the recommendation is actually to get close to failure, but having enough energy or like reps left in the tank, about 1 or 2. So you just have to be close to failure. You don't have to be every time, just can't do any more. So just close. But so there's a fine balance there. So if you can do 1 more, then that's good. You can stop. And then what about rest? So, I think a lot of people are like, oh, so-and-so, you're like sitting around too much, I think I hear that. You're on your phone, but actually, if you do a short rest, it actually could blunt, as long as you're taking it to failure or getting close to failure, you can actually blunt the muscle building mode. So the ideal number, there's another ideal number, and it's 3 to 5. So it's the same thing as the amount of sets. So 3 to 5 minutes between sets actually optimizes your MPS because it gives your body time to recover. What about what time of the day? I think I get asked that question a lot, like, should I exercise in the morning? Should I exercise at night? What's the best time? Well, research comparing morning and evening actually for weight loss and muscle gain is pretty mixed. There's no definitive best time of the day to exercise, but really it's just consistency. So whatever time fits your schedule, then that's the best time to exercise for you. But there are studies, right? So based on fasting and fed as well. So I think a lot of people wonder about, should I eat before I exercise? Should I fast? So if you fast before you exercise, actually you can increase fat oxidation. And again, this is pretty mixed and debatable about what time you should be eating and whether or not you should be fed before. But you may burn more fat if you're fasted. However, this time is fairly acute, meaning that it's a short amount of time, and it doesn't consistently translate for a greater 24 fat loss of energy expenditure. And you may actually have more compensatory mechanisms, like more increased hunger, and you may actually reduce less fat later on. So again, mixed. There was a great study that showed if you do early time-restricted eating, so if you do some sort of fast to actually do it like, for example, between 8 and 2 p.m., with combined resistance training and obviously high protein mass, that it may actually at least maintain and you can gain muscle. So if you did any type of fasting, that would be probably the most ideal. All right, and then how about how frequent? So I think a lot of people are like, okay, so that one exercise, again, is not optimal, okay? You gotta exercise that same muscle group at least twice, okay? So one single time of resistance training can actually stimulate muscle protein synthesis for 72 hours. It typically peaks at 24 hours, but you have to train each muscle group. That means not just like, you're training your arms one day and then you train your legs the other day, but then you don't do, that's technically 2 times that you're exercising, but you have to train that muscle group. So at least 2 to 3 times per week. So you would have to do arms twice per week, right? Or legs twice per week. And so frequency is actually a very key driver. Higher frequencies can be used for really like advanced lifters, and sometimes this can actually lead to even more muscle gains, but it is at least twice. And then the sets should be about 10 to 20 sets per muscle group. So you can split that across the 2 to 3 sessions. And I know we talked about overtraining. How many of you have heard about overtraining? Okay. I know you guys are like, well, I'm just getting back into exercise, right? There's no way that I could be overtraining. Well, actually, anyone can overtrain. So, and actually people who maybe have chronic conditions or are under a lot of stress, like you're more at risk. So I wanted to make sure that we touched base on this because really it's a balance of stimulus and recovery. So overtraining occurs when intensity, your training intensity or volume actually exceeds your recovery capacity. And this can impair MPS and actually muscle adaptation. So you will not actually be gaining, you'll be exercising so much, and you actually won't be gaining any muscle mass. And again, what I mentioned is you don't have to be an athlete. So you don't have to be an athlete to overtrain. So you can, anyone who's working out, if you have people who are more prone to this, have chronic illnesses, hormonal imbalances, if you're in high stress, you have poor sleep or nutrition, so any of these things. And so the signs and symptoms I just wanted to give to you so you can keep a lookout is, either a sustained drop in performance, you have an inability to actually train how you used to, you're more tired, you're feeling burnt out, you may have more mood issues like depression or irritability, you have even more muscle soreness, aches, pains, actually a higher risk for injury, and it may also cause you immune suppression. So people oftentimes they get frequently sick. Okay, and so what we get is this mismatch, and this is what we call a paradoxical deconditioning, where one loses the usual benefits in training, with actually training. So I know I've told you I'm an integrative practitioner, so really a holistic approach is, how do we prevent this? Well, balanced training and recovery is really key, making sure you're getting adequate sleep, making sure that you're getting adequate nutrition and hydration, that you have active recovery techniques, like you do also light exercise, stretching, massage, you can do hot, cold baths. You want to also make sure that you're not overstressed, so stress reduction is also really important. And then I think early detection is also very helpful. So I think it's called a recovery stress questionnaire to identify early warning signs. And a good one that you can do is an overtraining self-check. So you can do this at home to make sure that you're not feeling any of these symptoms. So there's a survey. This is just an example of the survey. So you'll ask these questions, within the last 2 weeks if you're having any of these symptoms. And then you should talk to your medical professional. So what nutraceuticals, lastly, is what I think is a lot of great things to help with muscle building. So L-glutamine, essential amino acids, and branched-chain amino acids, and creatine. I'm sure creatine, a lot of people have heard about it. Just a show of hands, how many people have heard of creatine? Yeah. How many people are taking creatine? Okay, so not that many. Okay, yeah. So I really think a lot of it has, gotten on the news and a lot of great studies, but I'll go over that in a second. So L-glutamine. So L-glutamine is an amino acid. It's the most abundant free amino acid in the body, and it's conditionally essential, meaning that it can be produced by the body. We don't have to get it outside. And sometimes what happens is that under stress, the demand might actually exceed the supply. So that's why taking some of this can be very helpful. It's typically found in our skeletal muscle, our gut, and our blood, and it acts as an essential carbon nitrogen donor, and it's essential for its metabolism, protein synthesis, and immune function. So what it can do to help us is actually it helps with gut health. So I think, if you have any gut or intestinal issues, it may actually help with what we call leaky gut. So some people take this for that. It may also help with immune support. It helps with stress and illness. So actually people who have critical trauma or burns, major surgery, this is actually found in nutritional formulas, mostly for helping with healing and reducing infections. And it helps with metabolic balance. So people who have type 2 diabetes, it can actually support glucose metabolism and energy balance. So it's not just for building muscle, but when it is, it can actually preserve muscles. It can help with recovery, and then, like I mentioned, gut and immune support. So it may, in terms of muscles, it may actually help reduce with soreness and speed recovery. So supplementing with this, typically post-exercise, is really helpful. And like I mentioned with type 2 diabetes, if you supplement this, it actually can reduce your post-meal glucose. So it can support weight management actually indirectly. So side effects of this, it's very well tolerated. If you do have kidney or liver disease, it can be metabolized to ammonia, so you should be supervised while taking it. And the common dose that you would take is about 5 grams once or twice daily, and typically that's pre or post exercise. Also, so branched chain amino acids and essential amino acids are really great supplement as well. These are pretty popular. And so branched chain amino acids, that's leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And these are especially important for muscle energy and repair. Is anyone on this supplement, perhaps? Okay. One person, a couple people? Great. Yeah, so branched chain amino acids are really good at turning on MPS, and it contains a main component is called leucine. So in the essential amino acids is actually 9 different amino acids, and these are amino acids your body can't make, and they must come from either diet or supplements. And this includes the branched chain amino acids, plus histidine, lysine, methionine, phenylalanine, threonine, and tryptophan. So these main differences between the two, so how do you know which one to take? So turning on the construction crew, that's like the branched chain amino acids. So like I mentioned, leucine. So this is a signal to turn on. The essential amino acids, this actually helps with actual muscle gain. So it gives your builders like all the building materials. So again, why should you be taking this? Well, it stimulates MPS, prevents muscle breakdown, it helps with recovery, it actually can improve exercise performance as well. So you'll see a lot of people take it, either before or after exercise. And the safety profile, so again, very generally safe. You may have some GI discomfort, but those of you who are taking branched chain amino acids, really, I typically kind of recommend doing a balance between branched chain amino acids and essential amino acids, because with only branched chain, you might have a neurological and neurotransmitter imbalances. So just being careful on how much you're actually taking. And then the same thing with liver disease and kidney disease. You have to be cautious while taking this. Dosing for these, so branched chain, you should be taking about 5 to 10 grams per day. And again, leucine typically is in branched chain, which triggers muscle protein synthesis. So you want at least 2 to 3 grams, like picking a supplement that has 2 to 3 grams of leucine in it. So most of them will have a ratio of like 2 leucine, 1 isoleucine, and 1 valine. And essential amino acids, you'll want to take 10 to 15 grams per day. So lastly, creatine. So the famous creatine, this is a naturally occurring compound made from amino acids. It's actually made from arginine, glycine, and methionine. A lot of it is stored, so in the skeletal muscle, it's 95% stored there. It rapidly regenerates ATP, which is energy, and that's for short burst, high-intensity activities. It can also be found in red meat, poultry, fish, and it can be synthesized actually by your own liver, kidneys, and pancreas. So why is everyone taking this? So increases your strength and power. So it helps enhance ATP regeneration, improving performance. It helps with muscle mass gain, and we call this cell volumization, meaning the water actually gets larger in your cells, and this actually turns on the muscle protein synthesis. It can help improve your lean body mass, and by supporting a higher training volume, intensity, and recovery. So it also helps protect your muscle against muscle damage. And for people who are older, and for bone health, especially in postmenopausal women, supplementation may actually, help slow the progression of muscle loss. And then new and emerging actually is, neurological and cognitive benefits. So brain energy metabolism, neuroprotection, and actually mitochondrial issues. So really great for cognitive enhancement and memory, particularly in adults. So from 18 to 60, it also can be helpful for people who have had traumatic brain injury. So really great for memory as well. So if you have someone who you think might need it, you should say. Usually it's the husband or the wife, right? So really helpful for that, which is great. So safety profile, again, very generally safe, but some people while taking it, they may feel like they're having water retention. That typically goes away after, a couple weeks. Some people have rare issues like GI upset and muscle cramping. And then kidney health. So while you're on it, creatine is actually broken down to creatinine. So I'm sure you guys have gotten labs before, and one of the markers that they look for is called creatinine. And this can actually be increased very slightly, so a small rise if you're taking creatine. So it should only increase by 0.1 or 0.3. Yes? Oh, yeah. So sometimes it may be the quality of the supplement. So sometimes, with different supplements, right, they're not FDA regulated. So picking a high quality supplement, it may have toxin or impurities in it that may have caused it to go high. Yeah, but it's not common actually for liver health to see that. Just typically the creatinine number, which is your kidney function number. And so that's typically what we look at. But so if you are taking this medication or taking this supplement, another great way to assess your kidney function is by cystatin C or your eGFR. And if you do have a pre-existing kidney disease, it's limited evidence or mixed evidence on whether or not you should be taking it. So you should discuss this with your medical team. So dosing for this, so some people, they do a loading dose because they want to saturate their muscle cells. I don't typically recommend that. I usually say gradual is better because you may have more side effects if you're doing a loading dose. So I recommend about 3 to 5 grams every day, and then it takes about a month for your muscles to actually be saturated. And some really, I know this medication, GLP-1s are so popular, and just briefly, all these really great medications are actually coming out in the next year, so it'll be really interesting to see, and hopefully some of them are actually targeting, preserving muscle mass. So, And I think I'm getting told that I'm out of time. So, so I'm going to stop here, but it was really great. Hopefully I can just give you some of these practical takeaways. So I know I talked about a lot. So just to sum everything up for you guys, for nutrition, so I would recommend a traditional and anti-inflammatory diet pattern, how much protein you should be eating, 1.6 to 2.2 times your kilograms of body weight per day. And where should you be getting your protein? If you eat animal protein, that's probably a little bit better for MPS, but plant protein is just as good, as long as you take fortified or blended plant protein. And when you should be eating the protein, an even distribution, post-exercise. Don't forget about pre-sleep protein, and it should be 20 to 40 grams at each meal. And what kind of exercise? So resistance training, resistance training is really the main thing, but if you can do combined with aerobics, that's also very helpful for your health. And how do we do resistance training? Reps, there's no magic number. Aim for muscle fatigue with one pump left in your tank. And sets, you should be doing multiple sets. The magic number is 3 to 5. And they should be taken close to failure, but doesn't need to be at failure. And resting time, again, is 3 to 5 minutes between each set. And when you should be exercising any time of the day, as long as you can be consistent. If you want to do fasting, I would recommend doing an early time-restricted eating, and train each muscle group at least twice per week, aiming for 10 to 20 sets per muscle group weekly. And don't forget about overtraining. It can happen to anyone, okay? So just look out for that. And then these are the awesome nutraceuticals that I talked about. So I really find that these are great alternatives to helping preserve muscle mass. So just check them out, and that's all I have for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.